Have you ever wondered what Germans and Austrians think of The Sound of Music?
We don't think of it at all. Most people haven't seen it, and I'd wager most people outside of Salzburg haven't even heard of it.
First time I hear that name. Let me Google real quick. Nope, that's news to me.
A saying goes around here in Salzburg that goes, nobody saw The Sound of Music unless to make money from it.
Any Austrian who confesses to liking this piece in public will have his citizenship revoked immediately, without trial.
Confused? Let's talk about it. Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. And with Christmas time approaching, there's one movie that comes up quite a lot around here. The Sound of Music, a musical film that's set in the Austrian Alps during World War II, which is why when people around here find out that I'm from Germany, they bring it up from time to time. Yo, I know Edelweiss. That's like the national anthem or something, right? What? Edelweiss the flower? Oh, you grew up close to the Alps? That just immediately makes me think of Julie Andrews singing in the mountains. I love that movie. What movie? Oh, you're from Germany? I've always wanted to learn German, but the only words I really know is Guten Tag and Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. I know, that's cliche. Huh? Long story short, when I first came to the US, I had never heard of The Sound of Music, despite countless visits to Austria and growing up only about an hour away from Salzburg, where the movie takes place. But as you can probably tell from the title and the comments in the intro, I'm not alone with this. Almost no one in Germany, nor in Austria, has seen or even heard of this movie. While here in the US, it's considered one of the biggest classics of all time. And with Christmas coming up, it'll be part of the holiday nostalgia for a lot of people too. Just like today's sponsor, European Deli, where you can get all of the German Christmas treats and decorations delivered right to your door. So if you're still in need of some properly themed movie snacks, you're in the right place. Just look at all of these goodies they sent me. This chest by Lebkuchen Schmidt is seriously one of the coolest things I've ever seen. They're the brand for German Lebkuchen, so gingerbread, located in Nuremberg, which is kind of like the Christmas capital of Germany. The drawing actually shows the city of Nuremberg in the 1700s, and it's filled with every kind of Lebkuchen and German Christmas cookie you could possibly dream of. These ones are my absolute favorites. They're the Elisenschatz Rumrosine Haselnuss Rum Raisin Hazelnut, and they're the Lebkuchen of the year, so no wonder I like them so much. These were the only ones that I couldn't even wait until after recording to try them. I think I already had 3 out of 5, oopsie. You'll also get this beautiful tin filled with Lebkuchen, a Christmas Stollen, of course, that belongs to every German Christmas. They're kind of like a fruitcake, but 10 times better. Spekulatius, which I absolutely love, more Lebkuchen, and more Lebkuchen, and more Lebkuchen, and more Lebkuchen. Oh, and even more, and one more. And then, of course, all of these German Christmas cookies. Aside from Lebkuchen, one of the most important part of the German Christmas vibe is Glühwein, of course, mulled wine. With this Glühwein spice mix or the syrup, you can easily make Glühwein at home, and they now even have non-alcoholic Glühwein so that you can get 100% of the flavor and the cozy vibes without any of the alcohol. And we even got this amazing Feuerzangenbowle set. I think most people who've been to a European Christmas market before have seen this rum-soaked sugar cube that's on fire and dripping into your mulled wine. It's really more than just a drink, it's a whole experience. And then just fill it into your mulled wine mug, also from European Deli, and enjoy. They also have an amazing selection of advent calendars, and fitting to the video topic, they sell all kinds of Reber Mozartkugeln, which if you've ever been to Salzburg, you'll see all over the city. Ben also got some German coffee in this cute tin. He doesn't really like American coffee anymore. This sweet mustard crock, and some real Bavarian white sausages, because European Deli has way more than just Christmas stuff. They truly have everything your German heart could possibly long for, so be sure to check out their products. And of course, I have a special discount code for you again this year. With my code FELI24, you can save 10% on your entire order at europeandeli.com. Happy holidays! So how come The Sound of Music is considered one of the biggest classics here in the US, while it's virtually unknown in the countries where the story originated? To answer that, I think we need to back up a bit and first make sure that everyone is up to speed, even those who have never heard of this movie before. Disclaimer, yes, there will be lots of spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and don't want to know what happens, you should probably stop watching right now. The Sound of Music is an American musical drama film from 1965 starring Julie Andrews. Julie Andrews is a well-known actress even in Austria, Germany, and other European countries. Most people know her from her role as Mary Poppins, or millennials like myself might also know her from Princess Diaries. The movie is based on a stage musical composed by Richard Rodgers with lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein. In the 1940s and 50s, Rodgers and Hammerstein were a famous duo who wrote some of the biggest Broadway musicals of the time, such as Oklahoma, South Pacific, or The King and I. The stage musical of The Sound of Music came out in 1959, and then 6 years later, they filmed the movie directed by Robert Wise, who also did West Side Story, among other films. The plot is based on the true story of the Austrian von Trapp family. A few years prior to the Broadway musical and the Hollywood movie, that story had already been turned into a German movie called Die Trapp-Familie from 1956 and a sequel called Die Trapp-Familie in Amerika from 1958. Those movies were very popular at the time, which is why I'm sure many of the German-speaking viewers among you have at least heard of the Trapp family before, and maybe you've even seen the movies. I gotta admit though that they didn't stay quite as popular with the younger generations, so I had never seen those movies either, and quite honestly, I had never heard of the Trapp family and their story at all before I came to the US. If you're from Germany or Austria, were you familiar with the story and maybe even grew up watching these movies? Let me know in the comments below. But let's get back to the Hollywood movie, The Sound of Music, which takes place in the year 1938 in Salzburg, Austria, where a young woman named Maria, played by Julie Andrews, lives at Nonnberg Abbey to become a nun. But since she's not doing so well with the discipline required of her, the Reverend Mother suggests that Maria gains some experience outside of the abbey and sends her to the villa of Captain Georg von Trapp. He's a widower and retired naval officer, and Maria is supposed to help raise his 7 children as the governess for the next few months. When she gets there, she witnesses how the captain uses strict military discipline with his children instead of fatherly love, and she soon finds out for herself how the children have managed to scare off all the other governesses before her by playing tricks on them. But after some initial difficulties, Maria ends up winning over the children's trust with kindness and patience, and when the captain is out of town visiting his love interest, she even takes them on fun trips around Salzburg and teaches them how to sing, which is one of her biggest passions. The group becomes really good at singing, and even the captain joins in, which brings the family closer together. Of course, he ends up getting engaged to his love interest, a baroness who secretly plans to send the children to boarding school after the wedding. But then he shares a romantic dance with Maria, which leads to Maria leaving the villa due to her feelings for him, but of course she eventually comes back. The Baroness breaks off the engagement with the captain, and he gets married to Maria instead. Now, since this movie takes place during the Third Reich, it's to no surprise that the Nazis play a role as well, because shortly after the wedding, the Anschluss of Austria takes place, so Austria is being annexed by Nazi Germany, and the captain, who's a strong opponent of the Nazis, is ordered to Bremerhaven to fight in the German Navy. In order to avoid this, he tells his family that they have to leave Austria immediately. But on their way out, they run into Nazi officials, so they claim to be on their way to the Salzburg festival instead, to perform as a family choir. In fact, a family friend had previously signed them up for the festival, so they go there, escorted by the Nazis, perform on stage, and right after, they take off, find shelter at the Abbey, and then escape walking across the Alps, heading towards Switzerland. That's where the movie ends, but in real life, the family ended up immigrating to the US, where they toured as the Trapp family choir. In 1949, the real Maria von Trapp wrote down their story in a book called The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, which is what both of the German movies as well as The Sound of Music is based on. In the US, the movie movie was released in March of 1965, and after just a few weeks, it became the #1 box office film in the country, and eventually one of the most commercially successful movies of all time. It won 5 Oscars and countless other awards, and it became a major success outside of the US too, such as in the UK, Canada, Latin America, the Netherlands, Japan, and Hong Kong, just to name a few. Today, The Sound of Music is truly a classic in the US, and with TV channels showing reruns during Christmas time every year, it's kind of become one of these nostalgia movies that many people like to watch around the holidays. The song My Favorite Things is even part of many Christmas playlists these days, even though neither the song nor the movie itself has any references to Christmas. In Germany, one of the movies that always runs over the holidays is Sissi, which is also an Austrian-based movie from a similar time era, and both of these movies fall under what in the German-speaking world is known as the Heimatfilm genre, which loosely translates to homeland movies. They're usually German-speaking movies from the period after World War II that kind of romanticize the simple rural life in the Bavarian, Austrian, and Swiss Alpine regions. Some of them even gained international success, such as Im Weißen Rössel, The White Horse Inn. And even though The Sound of Music is an American production, it could definitely fit into that category as well. Now, with this huge international success, The Sound of Music was actually the first movie that was completely dubbed in a foreign language. Well, 4 languages to be exact, one of them being German. And this meant that they dubbed both the dialogue and the songs. So about 10 months after the US release, the movie finally hit the theaters in Germany and Austria under the name Meine Lieder, meine Träume, which translates to My Songs, My Dreams. But against all expectations, it was a huge flop. It received bad reviews, low ticket sales, and since nobody really knew the Broadway musical either, there just wasn't a whole lot of interest in the movie. I even read that in Salzburg itself, the movie was dropped from theaters after just 3 days. But why would one and the same movie be so widely successful in some countries, yet be completely irrelevant in others? Well, I did some digging and I actually found a few different explanations for this. Remember those German-speaking movies about the Trump family I mentioned earlier? Those had come out just 9 and 7 years prior to The Sound of Music, and they were among the most successful German Heimatfilm movies of the time. And in a lot of ways, The Sound of Music is really just an English-speaking remake of that first German movie, except that they added the songs and romanticized the story even more. And that just didn't really appeal a whole lot to the German-speaking audience, because if you really like a movie, you're usually not very eager to see the same story reinterpreted in a different way with different actors just a few years later. Another reason is certainly that even though the movie takes place in Salzburg and was filmed there too, a lot of locals consider it to be very Americanized, with Disney-like stereotypes that kind of paint a warped picture of their country and culture to the rest of the world. The movie doesn't have a whole lot of elements that native Austrians or Germans who share a lot of the same culture can actually relate to. One example is that the song My Favorite Things mentions
Schnitzel with noodles,
which isn't a combination you'd ever find in Austria. Schnitzel is usually served with vegetables on the side, like a salad or potatoes or even fries nowadays, but never with noodles. Now, as someone who's lived in the US for a while, I have a suspicion that they may have been referring to Spätzle when they said noodles, and that combination actually works, but Spätzle are more like little dough dumplings or little gnocchi and not the same thing as noodles, so I know that a lot of locals are kind of thrown off by that line. I also read that the Ländler dance that Maria and the captain do together isn't an authentic representation of the traditional dance. Now, I'm not an expert and can't really judge this, but if any of you are familiar with the traditional Ländler dance, please let us know in the comments below how realistic the dance scene really is. A lot of locals are also turned off by the image of Austrians always wearing lederhosen and dirndls while singing and dancing all day long, as well as some of the geographic graphical inaccuracies in the movie. Some people criticized that when Maria and the kids dance all over Salzburg during the Do Re Mi song, they're suddenly in a whole different part of the city that's miles away from one shot to the next. Even though after I rewatched that scene, I think it's pretty clear that that whole sequence is supposed to be a montage representing different days, since their outfits keep changing too. But what's been criticized even more is that at the end of the movie, it's implied that the family simply crosses the Alps on foot with 7 children and no food supplies, heading for Switzerland. And while that may have made for a nice ending to the movie, it just doesn't really sit right with locals who know that Salzburg does not border Switzerland, but is actually over 200 miles away. In reality, the movie shows the family crossing the Untersberg mountain, which would have led them right into Nazi Germany, and even more so towards Berchtesgaden, where Hitler's eagle's nest was located. Probably not the best place to go when you're trying to get away from the Nazis. Another factor that may have played a role in the lack of success is the music, which isn't exactly Austrian either. They're American show tunes from the 1950s, not Austrian folk songs, as the movie makes it seem. So when, at the Salzburg Festival, the captain performs the song Edelweiss as a declaration of love to his country, and the entire audience starts singing along, feels a little strange and unrealistic to locals, since that's not an Austrian song at all, and no one in the audience would have ever heard of it. There even seems to be a common misconception around the world that Edelweiss is the national anthem of Austria. In 1984, the American president Ronald Reagan even had the song playing as he welcomed the Austrian president Rudolf Kirchschläger, which a lot of people criticized as an uneducated gesture. Even though, in his defense, the real Maria von Trapp was actually at that event too, so some people have said that Reagan mainly had the song playing as an homage to her story. Who knows? Speaking of music, as I mentioned earlier, the entire movie was dubbed, including the songs, which means that there are actually German-speaking versions of all of the Sound of Music songs, and I just now listened to them for the very first time. And after doing so, I have to say that dubbing those probably didn't exactly help the movie either, because in my opinion, the songs just don't work very well in German. I feel like they almost come across as even more kitschy than they do in the original, and also a little forced. Like, it's even more unauthentic when a German voice sings about Schnitzel mit Nudeln. So I wouldn't be surprised if that just didn't really appeal to people's taste at the time. In general, maybe people just weren't really ready to watch a movie that's been dubbed. What also rubbed a lot of German-speaking viewers the wrong way was the list of historical inaccuracies. Like how the movie portrays the Anschluss in a scene of Nazi soldiers marching into the empty streets of Salzburg, showing reluctant pedestrians, while in reality, it looked like this. And here in Vienna, there were over 200,000 Austrians cheering for Hitler and supporting the annexation. The movie also twisted a lot of the details of the Trapp family story, like how they changed some of the children's names, genders, and ages, or how in real life, Maria wasn't initially sent to the house as a governess, but to teach one of the daughters who was sick. She also got married to the captain about 10 years earlier than in the movie, and by 1938, they had already welcomed 2 children of their own into the family. In regards to the love story, the real Maria actually wrote in her biography that she wasn't in love with the captain, but mainly got married to him because of how much she loved the children. Several reports also state that the captain wasn't nearly as strict as he's portrayed in the movie and was actually a loving parent. Meanwhile, Maria used corporal punishment when the kids misbehaved, which is actually the reason why in 2017, the city of Salzburg decided against naming a trail after her. And of course, the family didn't flee over the Alps to Switzerland. We've already established that. Instead, they actually took a train to Italy, from where they went to the UK and then to the US. And while they did perform at the Salzburg Festival and win the first prize, that had taken place 2 years earlier, so they didn't actually flee right after their performance. And fun fact, or not so fun fact, after they left Austria, the real Trapp villa, which was not shown in the movie, became the summer residence of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. which is just a very tragic twist of fate. Last but not least, I came across a lot of explanations saying that the movie wasn't successful because it deals with the Nazi regime. Now keep in mind that the movie only came out about 20 years after the end of World War II. And 20 years might sound like a pretty long time, but in the 1960s, Germany and Austria were still very much in, let's call it, denial mode. I talked about it more in detail in this video, but during that time period, the Third Reich and World War II were still pretty fresh. The majority of people had experienced it firsthand, and a lot of people who were responsible, or at least passively participated in the discrimination and crimes that were committed, were still very much alive. They were your parents, grandparents, teachers, and even politicians. So this wasn't really a time period yet where Germans and Austrians had taken collective responsibility for what they did. For the most part, that chapter of our history was simply not talked about. And because of that, the German distributor of The Sound of Music, or excuse me, of Meine Lieder, meine Träume, decided to cut the entire last part of the movie where the Nazi plot comes in. So they showed a shortened version in German theaters that ended with the wedding, until the American director and the production studio intervened and made them show the entire movie, because they had not approved of that. But even though it's true that this wasn't really a time yet when people were open to revisiting the history of the Third Reich, I'm honestly not 100% sure how much of a role this really played in regards to the movie's lack of success. Because the German-speaking Trap movies that were very successful had the Nazi plotline too. I mean, it wasn't quite as prevalent in the German movies, so maybe that just made the fine difference? Or maybe it was perceived differently when the historical criticism came from abroad? Maybe people felt more offended by that? I honestly can't tell you, but by the 1970s and 80s, Germany started to actively work through its past, and today, the topic of World War II and the Third Reich is something that we talk about all the time. Again, be sure to check out this video if you haven't yet. So at least from a modern day point of view, that certainly wouldn't be a reason for any German or Austrian not to like the movie. Now, at the end of the day, it's most likely a combination of all of these things that led to The Sound of Music not being very popular in the German-speaking world. And the movie was never really shown on TV either, so it never became a timeless classic the same way it did in the US and many other countries across the world. That being said, even though most Austrians have never seen The Sound of Music, it actually plays a huge role for the tourism industry. In Salzburg, which mainly markets itself as the birthplace of Mozart, the movie has actually become the #1 reason for tourists to travel there. So it's more influential than Mozart in that regard. Especially American and Asian tourists love to attend the Sound of Music bus tours where they get to see all of the filming locations in and around Salzburg. Last year, I actually went on one of those tours myself for the very first time when I hosted a group trip to Germany and Austria with over 20 Americans. I mean, you just can't take Americans to Salzburg without doing the tour, and even though it wasn't quite as emotional for me as it was for a lot of the others, I will say that the tour takes you to some really beautiful locations. So if you're visiting and don't have any other way to see those places, I think it pays off for the views alone. As for me, I watched The Sound of Music for the first and only time so far in 2020, so 4 years ago, and that's when I realized that I was actually familiar with a lot of the songs, or at least the melodies from the movie. I just never knew where they were from. By the way, Josh and I recorded a whole podcast episode about The Sound of Music a couple years ago, him being an American living in Munich who grew up with the movie, and me being a local, so if you want to check that out, I'll link it down below. Now I'd love to hear from you guys. Where are you from, and have you seen The Sound of Music? Did you like it? And is it popular in your country? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out European Deli for a magical Christmas experience and use my code FELI24 for 10% off. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy my content, follow me on social media, and with that, I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!